welcome once again to another episode of Foundation with Steve Teed. I'm your host and servant, Steve Teed, here to ask you that important question. What is it that you build your life on? What is it that you use to answer those questions of life? Those serious questions of life. Those ones that really define what's right, what's wrong, what's the meaning of it all. That's what we're here. We're here to help you build on a solid foundation. Let me cut back the music today and I'll tell you where we're gonna go. Because today, we do have a theme for today. And today's theme is going to be all about gender. That's right, you've heard that right. All about gender. We're going to talk about gender in a variety of ways. But before we do that, we're going to just jump on over. We're going to hit a story about Harry Potter. Not really Harry Potter, but rather the actor who played Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I've never watched Harry Potter. I've never read Harry Potter. I have no desire to watch Harry Potter. I have no desire to read Harry Potter. That's just the way I am. And besides, when it comes down to wizards, Gandalf beats Dumbledore any day of the week. And again, I have no idea really who Dumbledore is outside he's a wizard. I don't know that. Anything else? And truthfully, all I know about Harry Potter is about wizards and a school and people who don't have magic. I don't know anything about it. But I'm going to go visit it just for a little bit, just to start, before we get into our real topic on gender. Now, you say, why do I want to talk about gender? Gender is an important issue. See, it's one of those things that in our society, it's been really confused. We'll put it that way. So we're gonna define what is gender. We're going to define what is sex. We're going to define, are they the same thing? And then we're going to look at some stories. We're going to look at some things. We're going to unpack that for a little bit and looking at some things that are very interesting, we're going to say. And really behind this episode is to help you who are listening to form a solid foundation. And if you're a parent, which I'm assuming a lot of my listeners are, the ones that I know are all parents, or they're going to be parents one way or the other, and to come to training children. And so we're going to visit that and to help them build on a firm foundation. What are our children learning? What exactly are they learning in schools and that kind of thing? So we're going to unpack that. And that's what this is about. And then after the break, I'm going to become more controversial and according to this world. Not really, if you've been with me for a while. But we're going to talk about what are gender roles? What exactly are we called to do? What are we exactly called to be? And we're going to unpack that from a biblical standpoint to help, again, give you the firm foundation. Now, obviously, I teach that the firm foundation is that of Jesus Christ and His Word. So that's where we're going to go after my super long talking introduction today. Truly, it's only been about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. But either way, let's get into our first story about Harry Potter, our Harry Potter story. We got the music playing here, so here is our story. Here's what it looks like. Daniel Radcliffe choosing sides against J.K. Rowling in the trans argument was important. So that's kind of our story. And he said, what is this all about? Well, J.K. Rowling, now keep in mind, she is not conservative, she is not right-wing, she is left-wing as they come. But she has also kind of spoken out against the idea of transgenderism, which has caused some backlash, quite a bit of backlash, including of the people. Now, Daniel Radcliffe, again, if you're not familiar with him, he's the person who played Harry Potter. And he decided to speak out against it. Now, I'm not really interested in a whole lot about this article. It's not surprising that people would speak out against her. And face it, they talk against anything that is even remotely seeming to be aligned with what God actually desires. But I want to look at his reasoning, because there's a problem in his reasoning. But that's what I want to look at. So let's pull this up here, okay? Here's what he says. The reason I was felt very, very much as though I needed to say something when I did was because, particularly since finishing Potter, I've met so many queer and trans kids and young people who had a huge amount of identification with Potter on that, the 33-year-old actor told IndieWire during a recent interview. Now, just so you know, that awkward language at the start was not me. Now, I know that I can stumble over words at times. It usually happens when my brain goes faster than my mouth. That's what my wife usually says. She says I have too much going on in my head, and it kind of comes out jumbled sometimes. That's always kind of been a problem. But that starting sentence was actually his. A direct quote. The reason I felt very, very. That was his writing. But he says, and he said, so continued on his quote. He says, and so seeing them hurt on that day, I was like, I wanted them to know that not everybody in the franchise felt that way. It was really important as I've worked with and this LGBTQ nonprofit suicide prevention organization, Trevor Project, for more than 10 years, and so I don't think I would have been able to look myself in the mirror had I not said anything. He continued, but it's not mine to guess what's going on in someone else's head. Now, I'm going to say something first, okay? I'm not like some. Daniel Radcliffe has a right to speak up of what he thinks. If he disagrees with J.K. Rowling, that's fine. He has a right to do so, and he can publicize that. But it's his rationale for it. And here's the problem with that rationale. And this is what I want to point out. Because a lot of times when people have fallen into what's called progressive Christianity, you say, that, what does that have to do with any of this? It has quite a bit to do with it. But the reason they often fall into it is because they've heard things such as LGBTQ is evil, LGBTQ is wicked, LGBTQ is sinful. And with that, although those statements are true, with that, there's the combination of combining the LGBTQ lifestyle with the individual. And so let's rephrase those sentences using it that way, which is LGBTQ people are evil, LGBTQ people are wicked, LGBTQ people are sinful. Now, although that last one is true, it's those first two, calling them wicked, calling them evil. And then what happens is that you can meet people who are in the LGBTQ movement who are absolutely wonderful people from our standpoint. And it's true. I know people who are gay, and they're nice people. They're friendly. They'll help you out in a situation. They're kind. Even that way. I remember when I was in one speaking arrangement where a gay couple was coming to the church, and it's funny because we were talking after a service one day after I'd been teaching, and they come out and they said, so you know what, I would never step foot in a Baptist church again. That's what he said. And all I said was, where are you currently standing? And then he was, not you. He was a nice guy. And I remember even walking along, he saw my wife walking one day with one of our children. He just stopped driving and started to talk with her. There are plenty of them. There are nice LGBTQ people. That's often what happens. And they're nice, and so they're like, well, then they've been wrong. And see, the problem is, and this is what his issue was. Notice what he said. The reason I felt very, very much as though I needed to say something was because particularly since finishing Potter, I've met so many queer and trans kids and young people. In other words, he met nice ones. And he's like, I just want to help them out. And so there's two issues with this. One, just because somebody is nice doesn't mean that what they're engaging in is good. In fact, if you look at some of the reports of serial killers, and it seems extreme, but it's true, male serial killers, some of them they would be classified as charming, charismatic, nice guys, that kind of thing going on. And you see that happening, but that doesn't mean that, hey, what they did is good. What they're doing is good. And so the first thing is the idea that just because you meet somebody who's engaging in that kind of lifestyle, who's in that, and they're nice, and you want them to feel good, doesn't mean that what they're doing is good. And the other problem is the idea is like we want to affirm them. Well, you don't want to affirm people in something that is not good for them. This is like going back to back in time here to the cigarette companies putting out cigarette commercials which saying, oh yeah, cigarettes are good for you, and they promote all the good things about it, saying, oh, they can be relaxing, and in fact they actually can be stress relieving. Think about it. Back in the World War, even my grandfather, who was a good Christian man, ended up being the pastor of visitation at his church, and even when he was 90, he would take communion to the shut-ins of the community. And he said, well, how good's my grandfather? My grandfather's responsible for the food bank in the city that he was in. He's one of the founding members of it. And so when he passed away at the age of 94, his funeral was packed. He was packed. And I'm going to tell you, from the perspective of someone who's done funerals, usually the older a person is, the smaller the funeral is. Just because most of their friends have been gone. But the influence he had was so great. But even when he came back from World War II, he was smoking. Now you go, well, how could you know that? There's no way you were alive after World War II. And that's true. I was not alive after World War II. But the reports are true. He came back smoking. Why? Because a lot of people smoked over there because of the stress. And so you get this proponent, oh no, therefore smoking is good for you. And we're like, wait a minute. Smoking, the other chemicals, the tar in it, the other chemicals in it keeps you addicted. And it's actually bad for you. The bad outweighs the good. And that's the way it is in these things. And so just not wanting to upset somebody isn't more loving than speaking the truth in love. And that's what we have to do. We have to be willing to speak the truth in love. And so that's all I really wanted to point out about that article, is just that those two things, because we can fall into that trap so easily. On anything, it's like, oh, they're good people. They're very lovely people. They're wonderful people. But so I don't want to upset them. I don't want to tell them what they're doing is wrong. I don't want to tell them that, hey, this is sinful. Why? Because I don't want to upset them. They're lovely people. In fact, I find them better than those who claim to be followers of Christ. And that may be true. That may be true. But it really doesn't matter. If we love them, and we truly love them, we would never affirm somebody in something that's harmful. And unfortunately, the stats really do show that it is more harmful. It really is. This is like a dietitian or a doctor, or one of the two, talking to somebody who's eating themselves to death, saying, no, you're fine, you're perfectly fine. We're just going to affirm you in the fact that your heart can't pump because you got so much fat pressing against it, that your lungs can't fully expand because of the excess obesity and the weight pushing on your lungs, not allowing to expand. Oh, I know your legs are painful. Oh, it's okay. We're going to affirm that by getting you some more food. And we're going to get you unhealthy food. You say, that's not loving. And unfortunately, a lot of people have fallen into the trap that Daniel Radcliffe is. That saying, hey, I know them, I love them, and I just want to affirm them. I want them to feel good about themselves. And in the long run, it doesn't work. It really doesn't. And so we need to stand up in love to point it out. That's all it was about. Now, Daniel Radcliffe, as I said, he has a right to say against what he wants against J.K. Rowling. I just completely disagree with him. And at the same time, I wanted to pack out his reasoning, because it is one of those reasonings that we can fall into, and I want us to stay away from it. All right. Let's get on to the next kind of thing here. So I'm going to bring this up. All right. So what are we going to talk about? The real topic of today, gender. What is gender? Now, Matthew Walsh put out a documentary not too long ago, and I never watched it. I'm not going to pay to watch it. I'm kind of that way, although I do understand what it's about. It was called What is a Woman? And I've seen clips from it. And part of it, what it was about, is he was going around and asking the question, what is a woman? And he traveled from place to place asking the question, see who could answer the question. How would they answer the question? That kind of thing. But it's a fair question. Now, I'm not going to be talking about what is a woman, although I may define that a little bit later. What I want to talk about is this idea of gender and sex. Now, I teach youth as well as adults and children, and I teach a lot. And on Friday nights, I teach youth. These come from a variety of backgrounds. Some grew up in the church, some did not. Some are believers, some are not. Some are in middle school, some are in high school, a couple are in college career. And I started this year, and every time a new person comes, they have to fill out one of my surveys for me. It only takes about 5 minutes if everything goes right. But in that survey, I ask a very specific question, and it's just agree, disagree, agree, somewhat agree, disagree, or I don't know. And so I ask questions such as, the Earth is 6 billion years old. Everything began with a Big Bang. Everything was created by a supreme being. I have a purpose. The Bible is historically accurate. The Bible contains contradictions. And they're allowed to agree and disagree on all these topics. Now, in there, I also wrote in things such as, I know what LGBTQ means. And no surprise there. Then when it came to I know the meaning of LGBTQ, there was only one person of all of them that didn't know what it means. Everybody else was strongly agree. They strongly agree. They knew what it meant. But then I asked a few other questions. It was things like, I know what cisgender means. And only one knew what it meant. Now, most of them marked I don't know, and one marked disagree. But I don't know and disagree in that case would be the exact same thing because they have no idea what the word is. And in fact, the leaders didn't know. They had to look it up. Now, why was that an important question? Because it's one that's being pushed. But then I also asked the question of sex and gender are the same thing. That was the question. And here's the surprising answer. I was kind of surprised at this. Now, in somewhat. Surprised about it. Why? Because I've got quite a few who are coming through public school. I got a homeschooler and I got a private schooler. It's the way it is. But the vast majority are in public school. If they're not out of public school now. They went through it. And asking that question, only one of all the youth, only one of them answered, I agree. I agree. Only one answered, I agree, saying gender and sex are the same thing. Only one answered disagree. Everyone else said they don't know. In other words, they really didn't have a clue what was being taught. They didn't know what it meant. That's a fascinating thing to find. Now, that's a relatively small sample. When the youth group was larger, quite a bit larger, there was one in there who would define these things. But it is something that you have to understand. Because definitions of words have changed, particularly in this area, and this is a very strong area that we're going to unpack here, because it's one that all the arguments are coming down to. And this is why when they talk about it, they can miss the argument back and forth. And so we're going to define these terms. Now we're going to define them, and I'm going to use a source that I've never used before. Why? Because I pretty much disagree with almost every aspect of their work. I'm going to go to Planned Parenthood is where I'm going to go. And you go, well, Planned Parenthood? Planned Parenthood. Yeah, I'm going to go to Planned Parenthood. That's where I'm going to go. So, let me pull up the Planned Parenthood. Here's Planned Parenthood, taken directly from their website, is where it's from. So, what are the differences between sex, gender, and gender identity? Now, this is important. Sex. It's a label, male or female, that you're assigned by a doctor at birth based on the genitalia you were born with and the chromosomes you have. It goes on your birth certificate. Now, I'm not really going to argue about that. I could argue about the idea saying that the doctor assigns it to you. No, it's a genetic thing. It's genetics. Now, notice that they actually have the chromosomes you have. The doctor basically declares rather than assigns. So the language there is a little off. The doctor declares what it is. So it's when it's born, oh, you have a whatever. And that's the way it's always been. So gender. Gender is much more complex. It's a social and legal status and set of expectations from society about behaviors, characteristics, and thoughts. Each culture has standards about the way people should behave based on their gender. This is also generally male or female, but instead of being about body parts, it's more about how you are expected to act because of your sex. Okay, that's where I'm going to really unpack a little bit. And we need to define some things here, but I want to continue the last one. Gender identity, what is that? It's how you feel inside and how you express your gender through clothing, behavior, and personal appearance. It is a feeling that begins very early in life. Now, I'm going to come against that. But before I do, I'm going to go to another site here. Another one that I'm going to pull up here. And this one is actually, it's called caringforkids.cps.ca. So it's under the Child Protection Services of Canada. And I want to see what they've said. What we mean by gender, some useful definitions. So they're going to define it. Now, the reason I want to pick up these things is because they've added three other categories. They've got sex at birth, gender identity, gender expression. Then they add sexual orientation, transgender, and gender dysphoria. And there's a reason I want to pick this up, because they're even confused in their own definitions. But here we go. Sex at birth. When children are born, sex is assigned based on external genitalia. A person who has a penis is said to be male. A child who has a vulva is said to be female. A child who is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit their description of male or female is referred to as an intersex child. Now, those are actually incredibly rare, and it's a biological defect, is what that is. That's a biological defect. But notice they throw that in there. Now, gender identity. Gender identity is who you know yourself to be. And that's an important detail. So it is important to know that gender identity exists on a spectrum. A person's gender identity can be masculine, feminine, or other. Let's continue. Gender expression. This is how you express your gender to others, whether through behavior, clothing, hairstyle, the name you choose to go by, etc. Words to describe someone's gender expression can be masculine, feminine, androgynous, etc. All right, sexual orientation. This refers to sexual or emotional attraction to one feels for another person. Again, there's a problem in there because you see there's something they've separated. Transgender. When a person's gender identity is not the same as the assigned sex at birth, they may be referred to as transgender, often shortened to trans. For example, a child born with female genitalia may identify as a boy, and a child may also say that they are not a boy or a girl, but just themselves. So apparently just themselves is transgender, because they don't want their sexual characteristics to be defined by who they are. Some cultures and indigenous people use the term two-spirit to represent a person who embodies both a masculine and feminine spirit, which makes no sense at all. Two-spiritist has many sublets of a spiritual and cultural nature. Then what's gender dysphoria? Because they put in here, gender dysphoria describes the level of discomfort or suffering that can exist when there is a conflict between the assigned sex at birth and gender identity. Some transgender children express no distress about their bodies, while others may express significant discomfort. This distress can be more obvious as puberty begins and the body starts to change. All right, so now you get your definitions here. And again, I disagree with what the Child Services one says. It's assigned based. No, it's declared. It is what it is. It's declared at birth. Now, so sex is not a hard one to break down. Sex is literally biological. That's what they're saying. Gender, on the other hand, if you followed those definitions, and the reason, again, I'm pointing this out is because I think a lot of times people, when they're discussing these things, and parents, they don't really understand what it means. They don't understand what's being talked about and why it's so confusing. Gender is divided as two things. So what is a gender? So they're saying gender is a societal construct. Now, here's the issue. Is if you remember for the longest time that people are saying, well, no, pink is not just a girl's color. And that kind of thing. And then you get signs like real men wear pink and things like that. So trying to claim these things where it's like blue is a boy's color, pink's a girl's color. Well, not really. And they say, well, these things don't really exist. Yet at the same time, they have to create this societal distinction. So what they have to do, when you hear somebody say they're non-binary, now it's a term that's not defined in that section. But non-binary, if you understand what binary is a set of ones and zeros, generally from binary code, heads or tails, that kind of thing, one choice or the other. And it's like, okay, so you're either male or female, but what if I don't fit either of those descriptions? Well, then you must be non-binary. And hence why you got that statement there, that gender is a fluid spectrum. There is the word I wanted. Gender is a spectrum. And so they've taken away what is boy and what's girl, what's male and what's female. And the thing is, behind this whole documentary of Matt Walsh's What is a Woman was really trying to get them to define what exactly is a woman. And the reason that that's important is because if you remove that definition from the word, you remove the definition of woman, then nothing means anything. Anything can be a woman. That's really what it can be. You can go look up, and I encourage you something, just go look up Matthew Walsh on Dr. Phil. There's a kind of a discussion there, and that's what started the whole what is a woman kind of movement. And without that, you've got a problem. And this is where they've really messed up our kids. And this is where they're attacking the kids, where they're taking out the definition of a woman. Now, I'm going to bring up a video. And if you're watching it, it's gonna be a little awkward for you. But I want you to listen to it. It's a TikTok video. Now, first thing, I encourage you, don't let your kids on TikTok. It's really going to mess them up. And you say, no, it wouldn't. Oh, yes, it will. They'll actually see, and there's documents out there that are things like TikTok has actually, because of TikTok, the increase of mental illness, the increase of IDDs, identity deficient disorder, something like that. I forget what the actual word is. Increase in depression and that kind of thing. But this video is from TikTok, and it's from this guy who claims to be, I won't even say transgender. Strange. It's easy. I'm just gonna pull it up here.
Hi kids. There's no such thing as a boy or a girl, and I can prove it. So gather around the family, the parents, everybody, answer my questions. You either say boys or girls. Who's usually taller? Oh, boys? Okay, but you've met some short boys, right? You've met some tall girls. So usually boys are taller, but not always. Okay, who likes the color pink? Girls? Okay, but you've met girls who don't like pink. And you met boys who do like pink. So usually girls like pink, but not always. Everything you can think of that makes a boy or makes a girl is usually, but not always. And some of them are not even usually. Where does that leave you? Free. You get to like what you like. You get to be who you are. Maybe you're even like me, and you're not a boy or a girl. Hi, kids.
All right. So, sorry that was a little disturbing for those who were seeing that. But did you catch what's happening? They just asked the question, who's taller, boys or girls? And he's like, well, usually boys. You see, what they do, and this is where the confusion comes in. This is where if you don't have a solid foundation that can handle these issues, you can be so caught up, you can be so taken in, you can be so wrapped up, and you go, well, I don't know. It's like usually boys are. But look, I've got a young boy who comes here. He attends the kids program, who I make fun of because one year, the leader was said for the kids to stand up, just introduce themselves. And when he got up off the bench and he stood up, he actually got shorter than when he was sitting. And it was kind of funny to watch. And he is quite a bit shorter than a lot of the girls. So all of a sudden, I guess he's not a boy anymore. See the problem? Then he was like, well, let's go to colors. What about the color pink? Who likes pink? It's like, usually girls, but it's like, but there are girls who don't like pink, and there are boys who do. You see what they've done with gender? This is what they've done. They said, okay, boys are taller, so therefore, if you're taller, you're a boy. If you like pink, girls like pink. So if you like pink, you're a girl, kind of thing. And what they've done, it's almost like we'll take a survey and scale these from 1 to 10, where you are. It's like, I am taller than most people. You're my age. It's like, and what happens if you're not? Well, mark that as a 1 or a 2 if you are, a 3 or 4. For me, I'd probably end up around like the 3 for men, maybe a 4. I am shorter than the average male. I just happen to be that way. That serves me well. Because I remember being at a conference one time when we stayed in some bunks. And I was the only one who could really fit in the bunk. Everybody else had to pull up their knees or they were hanging over the edge. I didn't have that problem. My low-hanging ceiling in the basement of my house. I don't have to duck. I had a friend in there who kept hitting his head every time he slept down there. I didn't have that problem. So there's an advantage to being short. But then it's like pink. Do you like pink? I've got a pink shirt. So I was like, I like the color pink. So I'd probably put that somewhere around, 5, 6 on the scale. How about you like cooking? And you like to cook? I'd put that probably about a 6 or 7. I enjoy cooking a good meal. I enjoy it from time to time. You like playing sports? I'd probably put that around a 4, 5. You really know a lot about cars. I've gotten better at fixing them, but I'd probably be somewhere around a 3. And then what would happen is if we took 10 questions like that, and it's like, well, unless you scored a 1 on everything, then you're not. If you scored a 1 on everything, then you're an absolutely you're a boy. If you scored a 10 on everything, well, you're absolutely a girl. But if you didn't, and you didn't score a 10 or 100, well, you're actually somewhere between a boy and a girl. Do you see that's what they've done? That seems funny, but that's what they've done with it. And they're confusing our children. So therefore, if you're a girl who happens to like sports and playing roughhousing and sports and that kind of thing, well, you're more of a boy. You're not really a girl. And then you catch the problem here, where it's like how you express yourself to be, or that kind of thing, or it's how you fit into that society. And if you don't fit in that, well, you're not. And so it's like, well, you must not be a boy. And this is how they're confusing our children. And what they've done is they've wrapped up stereotypical roles, stereotypical gender roles, what they would classify them as. And they've separated them so far apart and then said, well, if you don't fit those, well, then you're not really. It's a spectrum. And then so you can do whatever you want. And believe it or not, this is taught. And I'm going to show an advice thing here. And I'm actually going to answer the advice. So because of that, I'm actually doing it's not different, but I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put my advice music on here. I don't use it a lot, but get my advice music. And they're asking for advice from this. So it says, here's the thing. My husband and I have a frequent disagreement on our 3-year-old and her love for dresses and all things pink. For the first 2 years of her life, she was constantly mistaken for a boy because she wore gender-neutral clothes. We direct her towards books and other media that do not represent traditional gender roles. No sparkle princesses. We ask friends and family to refrain from commenting on her appearance and clothing, if they can help it, and instead focus on skills or interests. However, our daughter adores the color pink, insists on wearing dresses, and is currently obsessed with accessories. I'm fine with this, but my husband is not. What should we do? All right, that's the question, but here's my advice. Let her be a girl. Let her be a girl. Let her be a girl. And the problem is the danger here, and I'm going to say, you're going to, depending on how they go, they can mess up this girl right at this age. She's 3. And typically, your identity of how you're going to develop later in life usually stems by the time you're age 2, 3, and a little bit into 4. That's when you start to drop your identification. And I'm going to guess that this daughter is spending more time with females, is what it is. Second of all, what I wanted to point out, so first of all, I'll tell the dad to back off, leave the kid alone, let them develop, be happy with the way they are. Let the girl become a girl. See, the husband there is being upset, saying, I don't want her to be a girl. I don't want her to like those things. But I guarantee you that if they had a boy rather than a girl, and he started being interested in pink and color pink and shiny things, he'd be all for it. It's being taught. And you say, well, no, it's not. Well, yes, it is. When the data shows that there's a sudden peak, and I mean a sudden jump, we're talking like from 15% to 40% now identifying as LGBTQ. it's being taught. And it's families like this that are teaching it. And they said, look, our child was always misgendered. Why? Because we put them in gender, you probably put it in boys' clothes. And I've seen other discussions where the parents are like, oh, we're teaching our son to be non-gender. And so they put them in girl clothing. You're not teaching them to be non-gender, you're teaching them to be a girl. You're teaching them to be a girl. And so this is what's being taught. It's like, we don't want to teach it. We don't want to teach it. Look, you're trying to rob the daughter of female role models, and you're trying to rob the boys of male role models. And while the whole time what society tries to say is those traits that are masculine, so if a boy wants to fall into what they call the masculine traits, they're being told that's toxic. Yet when a female tends towards those things, they're being praised for them. And so what they've done is they're trying to destroy these things. And this is what is happening. Now, why did I say it was confusing? Because look at how they've redefined gender dysphoria in those definitions. Gender dysphoria literally used to mean when the mind didn't match the body. That's what gender dysphoria is. So when a child is growing up and you have a baby girl, and if for some reason when she's younger she thinks she's a boy or she feels more like a boy, and this can happen. It doesn't happen as often as they like to say, but it does happen. That's called gender dysphoria. Now, in actuality, like 90% of those cases, if left alone at puberty, it corrects itself. It's a hormone thing, really is what it is. But they don't want that anymore. Now, gender dysphoria is, well, it's discomfort. And look how it doesn't even make any sense at it. If I get the right one here, yeah. So, gender dysphoria describes the level of discomfort or suffering that can exist while there is a conflict between the assigned sex at birth and gender identity. And then notice this. Some transgender children express no distress. So there's no distress. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't even make logical sense. Then why would they classify themselves as transgender? There's obviously distress. But instead of our society helping to correct this now, they want to affirm people in the distress. And the truth is, why aren't they doing this in other areas? Like what I would classify as weight dysphoria. People who are anorexic would say, well, there's a problem with their self-perception. They feel like they're fat. They feel like they're overweight. And therefore, they go to extremes to correct that. Look, I had a friend who suffered from anorexia, and she ended up in the hospital because of it. Well, why didn't they affirm her in it and say, we're going to affirm you, and we're going to give you liposuction. We'll take what little fat you have on you off of you. We're going to affirm. No. They did everything they could to help her recover. They gave psychological help. They gave dietary help to help her recover from it, and said this is a problem. But technically, it was just how she felt didn't match how she looked. That's dysphoria. And so they've played with these things. And this is what's being taught to our children. And I want us to be aware of it. And if you're somebody who's suffering from that and you're listening to this problem of, oh, look, well, I'm a girl, but I like these things and things like that. Gender expression is a very real thing. It's just how do you express yourself? There's nothing wrong with a girl liking things that would be classified as traditionally masculine. I know a female. She's a female, a mother. She plays hockey. She organizes hockey. She organizes softball. She's a mechanic. Well, she's a body repair, we'll say. She does the body repair work, while her sister is an actual mechanic and does mechanic work. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean they're no longer females. They're females. And I think we've got to learn to accept it. This is what's being lied to. And it's okay to be that way and still be a female. See, back in the day, this is where they've changed terms. A girl who liked typically boy stuff was called a tomboy. Didn't really mean anything. It wasn't really an insult. It was just saying, oh, she's a girl who typically likes to be rough and tumble kind of thing. And that's fine. But what's happening is the confusion is. And they're running into that. All right, we're going to take a break at this time. I end up going a little bit longer on that than I normally would, but it's an important topic, and And if you're wondering why one of my episodes that it came out a little bit late, it's because I went over my allowed time limit for episodes that month. And it looks like if this keeps up, I'm going to end doing it again this month. We'll see what happens. But if you have any discussions, questions, please, I want you to write into me. I want to talk to you, and I want to help you through it, get you the proper help you need. And that kind of idea. So that's where I want to go. Okay, so come back after the break as we're going to continue in our topic on gender. What is gender and how does it work? Let's continue on that.
On behalf of the team at Creation Ministries International, thank you for your first-time visit to creation.com. Creation or evolution? Design or time and chance? It's a foundational question that affects every human being. And that's because what you believe about where we came from affects your ideas about the meaning of life, how you live it, and where you're headed. You see, what you believe about where you came from also shapes your view on whether there's an eternity or not. If we are the result of meaningless chance, then we simply return to nothing when we die. But if there is a Creator God, the Bible tells us that He has done something about the fact we will all eventually die. But can the Bible be trusted in an age of science? We pose 3 big questions and hope that you can see that the answers to questions 2 and 3 depend upon what you believe about the first one. Creation.com represents over 30 years of research by many scientists and specialists, and here you will find articles and media presentations on this hot button topic, the creation versus evolution debate. Best of all, it's all free. Many have questions like, what about dinosaurs in the Bible? Could God have used evolution? Is there life on other planets? And why would a loving God allow suffering and death? We've endeavored to answer these and hundreds more. So please enjoy creation.com.
All right, welcome back to our episode here, all on gender and that kind of thing. Before the break, we were talking and looking at how the world has kind of confused gender. How the world is trying to make it confusing for our kids and to try to teach them. Here, we're going to be looking a little more at the Bible, trying to build a solid foundation. That's really what it's all about, help you develop it. So before the break, it was all about pointing out the pitfall, pointing out what's being taught to our kids, pointing out why it's gotten so confusing. And here we're just going to take some time. We're going to dig into some of what's actually taught. We're going to dig into actually the truth of God's Word and the foundation of it and see what exactly does it mean. Now, when I say in the opening of this episode, so I'm going to get controversial. What I really mean is what I'm probably going to say is going to upset certain groups. And in fact, it is. Now, believe it or not, I actually wrote a book. Believe it or not, it was called Is This Church? And what it was kind of a reflection on my part as well, but it was a look at the modern church and how the church is supposed to be according to the scriptures. And so it looked at various aspects from such thing as an overall definition of what is the church, then started to look at very specific things from music to leadership to mission, everything like that. And it wasn't a long book. It was only about 120 pages. But I remember one of the reviews, if you actually find it, is the person gets kind of upset. A person got really upset because of one of my chapters, particularly on leadership. And because they didn't agree, pretty much. And this is probably what's going to happen in this section here, is that depending on where you fall. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but I am going to talk a little bit. If you fall onto, if you're complementarianism or egalitarianism. And if you don't know what those two words mean, then you're probably not going to have to worry about it. But if you fall more on what's classified as the egalitarian, you're probably going to be more upset. But you have a hard road to actually prove scripturally. And the person who got upset with my book was definitely on the egalitarian side. And in that aspect, they had to downplay scripture. They had to downplay certain sections of the New Testament because it didn't agree with what they wanted. And it's not the first time I've run into that. So we're going to unpack it from the very beginning. So we're going to define what is man, what is woman, what's their role, what's their job, what is the overall expression that we should be. And you're going to see that I'm going to bypass the whole idea of even gender expression because they've made it about society standards is what they've done. And it's not about society standards here. It's about God's standards. So what does God actually say? So we're going to go through some scripture on this episode, in this portion here. So let's jump right in. I'm going to go right to the beginning. If we're going to define what is man, what is woman, we've got to go right to the beginning. That's where we've got to go. And there's a reason for that. But let's go in. I'm going to go right to Genesis chapter 1, start at the beginning, 26 to 28. Genesis 1, 26 to 28. It says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Then God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth." Now, why did I want to start there? I wanted to start there because when we hold that humanity's been created, then we are created for a specific purpose. Again, in that questionnaire that I asked the youth, and I asked them, one of the questions I asked is, I have a purpose. That was the question. There is a purpose. And in that, I had everybody agreed, except one who was somewhat agreed. So they were all very much on the agreement side of that issue. So everybody agrees they have a purpose, but where does purpose come from? Purpose comes from the fact that you were created, that you were made, that you didn't happen by accident. This is why it's so important to have the firm foundation of the Bible, the firm foundation of creation. Now, if you're listening to this and you say, well, the science doesn't support that, I want you to actually come and challenge me on that. And I will introduce you and argue and point how the science actually does favor a created order rather than an accidental one. And if you want to research on your own, you want to come to me, I encourage you to go to creation.com. Creation.com. That's Creation Ministries International. Creation.com. And go there and search their thousands upon thousands of articles, over 10,000 articles by PhD scientists. And they will argue for a creation. So you're created with a purpose. And notice that it says, let us make man. That case, man is generic. And how do I know that's generic? Because it is qualified here in verse 27. So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And in fact, Jesus backs this up in his teaching on his teaching on marriage, where he verifies that God created them male and female. Now, that's important because the very first thing it's going to do is it's going to throw out this idea of transgenderism, that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. Man and women were created differently. They have different functions, different biological functions. We have different psychological functions. That's often how we are. And so the first thing you're going to have to throw out here is throw out all this idea of gender expression, that a man who likes to cook is feminine. That is not true. In fact, if you go into Genesis, Jacob was actually good at cooking where Esau was not. But Jacob was not a female. In fact, when Jacob moved across to his uncle's and he ran away from his brother Esau, Jacob took up being a shepherd. And he was a shepherd from then on out. So you can't you got to throw out the idea of gender expression. Gender expression. You got to throw that or this idea of binaryism. But there is a binary. There's male and female. That's the binary. Throw out the idea of gender expression. But he said, well, hold on. That doesn't really speak about anything about roles yet. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it does lay the groundwork for the statement that we are created for a purpose. That man was created for a purpose. That woman was created for a purpose. That man and woman were both created for a purpose. I want to go down to the kind of the parallel account or the zoom-in account of Genesis chapter 2. And he's talking about the man. The man was created first. Man was created first, and woman came later. And this is when God's going to create woman. Now look at the description here. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that a man should be alone. I will make a helper comparable to him." So, man was created, and God sees that a man is alone, so he's created one who is comparable to him. What does that comparable mean? Because this is where you can run into problems here. It means one who is equal in value. One who is equal in value is what it means. It's comparable. When you make a trade, I remember a long time ago, I was trading, I traded cards. I actually traded away a couple of Nintendo games. You sit there, you bargain back and forth. What's comparable? My wife here just traded in her vehicle, and it took a while to get what she wanted out of it, until eventually one said, "Okay, I will give you this much." That's comparable, the amount of cash she wanted. And so when at first you understand that man and woman are created, in this case, of equal value. Now, why am I not saying equal? Because equal means created the exact same. They were not. In fact, when man was created, he was created from the dust of the earth. When woman is created, she's created from a portion of man. Hence, when man names her woman, he says, "She's bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." But notice she's comparable. She's equal value to. Not more valuable, not less valuable. They are equal in value. And our society is going to have a problem with that because our society doesn't understand it. In our society, it's almost like if one's going to be, to raise the value of one, you got to bring down the value of the other. And we now have a society that, in essence, devalues men and devalues what you'd classify as masculine men. But women are created equal in value to men. And the role is kind of described here at first as a helper to him, as a helpmate, one who, in essence, completes the man. And that's one of the things that we've run into in our society, is that saying men and women don't need each other. Women, you don't need a man. Well, that's actually not entirely true. They actually do. Whether they value a man or not is another issue. Men are the same way. Men need women. Whether they value women or not is another matter. And what's happened is created this battle of the sexes. Now, some battle of the sexes are kind of funny. I remember watching a Mythbusters episode. It was just like answering these cliches. Who's the better cook? Who's the better driver? Who's the better navigator? Men, women, that kind of thing. Those are kind of funny. But the problem is we're now living in one where it's a battle for power. And you go, wait, what happened though? It was created where man and women were created of equal value, but they're also created for very different work. The woman was created as a helpmate for the man, to complete him. Think of the Jerry Maguire there, "You complete me." That's the way it was designed to be. And yet we try to go through and say, "I don't need them, I don't need you, I don't need you. If I want you, I'll take you. If I don't, I'll get rid of you." This is the problem. But what happened? Well, sin entered the world. And I want to just look here just at the curse on the woman. Now, when I say curse on the woman, the man got cursed too. And what was supposed to be a blessing, if you understand Genesis 3, the man was blessed with work. Believe it or not, that sounds funny. But they're blessed with work, to work the ground, to till the fields, that kind of thing. And to take care of things, take care of the world. That's what they were supposed to do. And woman was blessed with being the helpmate. That's a blessing for women. That doesn't mean less value. Blessed as the one who would complete the man, to help him be the one he's supposed to be in entirety. And she was blessed with childbirth. As we looked on our previous episode, it's like childbirth has become this thing that's it's going to inhibit you. Don't have children. That's what they're pushing forth with the abortion narrative now. That children are a burden on you. And so the blessing for the man of tilling the ground and the life he found in God was taken from him. Now by the sweat of your brow you will eat, and the ground's going to produce thorns and thistles and that kind of thing. And from dust you came, and dust you'll return. So, but women's blessing, on the other hand, was two things. One was, as I said, childbirth. One was childbirth, and now it's going to see children are going to bring forth in pain. So something that would have been, I don't know if it was pleasurable or what beforehand, or how it went, I'm not sure. but now that it's going to be multiply your sorrows and your conception. But then there's the second one. That seems a little strange. It says, your desire shall be for your husband. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that that she's just going to desire to want her husband? If you just took the line, maybe, but then the second line wouldn't make any sense. Your desire shall be for your husband or toward your husband. It says, and he shall rule over you. Or in other words, what has happened is, this is what you're seeing play out in our society, is that women are going to start battling to seek to dominate their men. Instead of being the helpmate, instead of being the one who is coming alongside, they're going to want to dominate the men. And that's kind of the problem. And so something has messed up. And so the roles have been lost. And this is what you're seeing in our society today. That it's like, hey, we're removing men and putting women in. We're saying women are better leaders. And it's a point, I think it was like a Grammy or Emmy speech. I don't know. I don't remember. I never watched them anyways. Where basically a female wanted, she basically about if women ruled the world, there'd be no wars. Which really doesn't make sense, given there's actually a study out there that's called Queen Bee Syndrome. You can actually look that one up. It's a fascinating study about how women relate to other women. And if you're not familiar with queen bees, the queen bee is in a beehive is the only one who can sting multiple times. And the reason for that is because when she's born, she quickly goes around to all the other queen bee eggs and she stings them to kill the queen bee. But if two get born at the same time, then they fight to the death. And it's how women are, how they battle for control. That's what the queen bee study is. And so saying there's no wars if women were in control, I'm sure there would be. That's kind of the way it is. But now it's thrown off the balance. It's thrown off the balance. So you look, what was the part of the role? The part of the role of women and men, or in this case, is is to work and women were to complete the men. That's what's supposed to happen. But let's continue a little bit in the scripture. Part of the role that was supposed to happen. You remember, one of the things that I mentioned beforehand is what's happening now is our children from the very young age are being taught incorrectly. They're not being taught what is a woman. They're not being taught what is a man. They're not being taught what does a man look like. And what you've ended up happening with, and this is a sad reality, is that men are being taught how to be men by women. And you may go, well, what's the problem with that? There's a big problem with that. This is why you're ending up with such an increase of effeminate men, because they're being raised by women. Now, I don't just mean that the old tradition of men are off at work and the wife is home taking care of the house and family and that kind of thing. That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is the continual rise in the single mother household, single woman household, single parent household, predominantly women, boys growing up into that. And so how are boys learning to act from that young age? They're not learning from their father, they're learning from their mother. And despite what society wants to think, women don't know what it's like to be a man. And vice versa. Men don't know what it means to be a woman. That's why you should always ask the question here. When someone comes up and says, you know what, if I'm a boy, I feel like a woman. I feel like a girl. Ask them, what do you mean? What does that feel like? What does it feel like to be a girl? If a girl comes up and says, well, I feel like a boy, ask them, what does it feel like to be a boy? What does a boy feel like? Because there's really no grounds for that. It's why it's messed up. Trust me, with my children, my middle child has said, hey, I'm a dog. Does that mean I should start putting him in the cage? Feeding him from the floor? No, he was just playing. And so you start unpacking these things. I remember even a guidance counselor one time going to lesson, because when I worked in camping ministry, they come up and they asked, took a course one time, and they were asking the questions, like, you've really got to ask questions here. She's like, why? She's like, because I was with another guidance counselor one time. They were saying this is them talking. And they said they had a child come in, and the child was like 11 years old. And the child came in and said, I really like sex. And the other guidance counselor was like, was really shocked and shocked, and the one who was giving the lesson said to them, just a second, tell me, what do you mean by sex? And they were like, kissing. And so they were defining all of sex as just kissing. That's all they knew. And see, this is what's happening. How are they learning it? They're learning it from the adults. They're learning things from adults, where the boys are growing up in female-dominant teachings for the youngest parts of their lives. If you don't think so, go look at daycares. How many men work at daycares? They don't, really. They really don't work at it. And why? And a man who does work at it is looked at with suspicion, believe it or not. How many elementary school male teachers are there? I'm not saying there's not any, but proportionally there's a higher proportionate. In fact, for my middle son, who's now coming through it, I think this is the first time he's had a male teacher. If there's males in elementary school, and I'm trying to think, even when I came through elementary school, I had one male teacher. One male teacher. And then even when I hit junior high, I only ran into... The only male teacher I really had was for shop. Was shop class. Now, once I hit high school, I had quite a few more. And then university, I had mostly, except for like one class. I think we're all male. But those early years, they're being raised by women. And so this is what's happening. So why is that important? Because that comes with the roles of it. So I'm going to go to Titus chapter 2 here in the New Testament. So he's talking, this is a letter to Titus from Paul. And he says, but as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine. What are proper for sound doctrine? So here's, that the older men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in the faith, in love, in patience. Okay? That's men. That's the role of men. That's it. Be sober. What does that mean? That means don't be drunk. Don't allow your mind to be clouded. To be reverent. To be temperate. Don't fly off the handle. To stand in the faith. To stand and be sound in love. Be sound in patience. To women. The older women likewise, that they should be reverent in behavior. In other words, conduct yourself appropriately. That's both men and women. Not to be slanderers. Not given to much wine. Now, I find that one fascinating in today's culture. Not to be given to much wine. It's like, why is that instruction given to women? But then I see in our society this increase of like mummy's sippy cup, I think is what it was. And it was a big wine glass. And how it's glorified women drinking wine, shutting off and like, I'm going to have my me time, curl up with a glass of wine and a good book. That kind of thing. And it's just a fascinating thing. A teacher of good things. So women do teaching, but who are they to teach? That they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. And if you continue on, it's going to talk, when it talks about younger men, there's less instructions for them. That's because they're to do everything else. They're to pick up all that too. And who are they supposed to learn from? From the older men. And I could give you the statistics. I could just touch on them here. I did this a while back in a lesson I did, in a lesson I taught for men. But when men are in the picture, when fathers are in the picture, things such as suicide, it drops by quite a bit. If men aren't in the picture, then a youth growing up is 5 times more likely to commit suicide. They're 9 times more likely to drop out of school. They're 10 times more likely to give into drug abuse. Men are far more likely to commit rape. They're 14 times more likely to commit rape if the father's not in the picture. They're 20 times more likely to end up in prison. And when the father is out of the picture, they're 32 times more likely to run away from home. That's a problem. That's a major problem. Men are to be there. Men are to teach. But you notice that they need to teach the next generation. And I think this is one of the biggest problems that we run into. Families are no longer raising the children. You say, what do you mean? Well, one, it happens because of economics. I was running over the stats with my wife this morning, and it's things like the average family is now spending $40 more per week on food. So if you got 4.5 weeks, that's 4 times 4, that's 160 and a half of 160. You got $180 more a month on food. That is a lot. To fill up a car is now like almost $20 more a fill up. Rents are jumped far higher than that. Mortgages, if you just locked it in, you're paying a lot more than that. Here's a fascinating thing. I bought a new car here a couple of years ago, actually earlier this year. Because I had it for 2 weeks until I got hit by a deer. And that was back in April. And I got the interest rate too high at 6.9%. That's higher than I wanted, but my wife just got a car and her interest rate is 8.5%. Like it jumped. It's that big of a difference. And the payments are far higher because of that. Despite the fact that her car only costs $1,000 more than mine. But her monthly payments are quite a bit higher. So these things are happening. So it's taking the parents out of the home. So where are the kids learning from? That's not even including the breakdown of the family. Where are they at? They're in daycares. And if they're in government-sponsored daycares, you say, well, no, mine's not the government-sponsored daycare. Look, it's government-subsidized daycares is what they really are. Most times you won't even know it, but if the workers get a top-up from the government, then it's a government-subsidized. And that means they teach certain things and they're not allowed to teach other things. And that's what happens. And so they're going to be teaching these things. And then what do? We send them into a public school system where to work in those public schools, you've got to affirm these things. And they're being taught things that are crazy. Where do they need to learn it? They need to learn it from the home. And it means that as the parents, we do have to work harder. It means, you know what? I want this little down me time. Well, maybe you got to sacrifice it. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of times how we teach our kids is not sitting down saying, hey, learn this, learn that, learn this. It's when we do like random chores with them. And look, I remember I was out grocery shopping one night and I ran into another parent, a friend of my wife's, and we stopped to talk for a little bit. And it was like, this is our alone time shopping groceries. But actually, my wife and I started, it's like, oh, we want to spend time with our kids too. It's like, so on this night, this is when you go out with this kid. Going grocery shopping with my kids is actually kind of fun. It really is. You take one child at a time and you go do it. And you just spend time. You'd be surprised how much time you spend talking, just driving back and forth from your house to the grocery store. And you teach them that way. That's part of the rules. Now I want to jump over to Ephesians 5 a little bit here. This one talks about marriage. And again, this is one that's probably going to upset people, but hey, oh well. But in this section, this is one thing I don't like about this. You see that title where it says Marriage, Christ and the Church? I wish that wasn't there. Not because that's not what it is. It's because the verse just before this is talking about how to live. And then it says, each one submit to Christ. And then this flows from it. It's one continuous thought. So wives, what are you to do? Submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Now, what does that mean? Do you remember back at the beginning in the curse, it said that women, your desire is going to be for your husband and rule over them? And there's a fight here. This is why people get upset. It says, wives, submit to your husbands. Now, notice it's as to the Lord. Now, this is talking in a Christian environment, is what it is. And then husbands, for the husband is the head of his wife, also as Christ is head of the church, and he's the savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let wives be to their own husbands in everything. Now, this gives two roles. Now, this is in the husband and wife relationship. But the head of the household is the husband. Now, that's going to immediately cause a kickback. Why? Because we don't really understand what that means in our society. Because it's like, I don't need a man to tell me what I can do with my stuff. I don't need a man to do whatever I want. If I want to go out, I don't want to have to ask a man. That's not what it's about at all. Look at the description of it. Notice that all it talks about for women is a little bit, but then men get a whole paragraph. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So a husband who is leading his household if he's doing it properly, this is where what a real man is. You want to talk about what a real man looks like. A real man is one who gives up absolutely everything for his wife and children. A real man is one who will, when there's very little food left, make sure his wife and his children are fed, and then he will take what's left. A real man does not put himself ahead of his wife. That's what it is. That's a real man. A real man says, I will lay down my life for my wife. That is what the role of a man is. That a man says, no, I'm not going to come home, just go out and go fishing, go hunting. Those are stereotypical male things. I would love to do that. Not the hunting, the fishing. I do like fishing. And I would love to do that, but I can't. Why? Because I have children to look after. And my wife and I both work full-time hours. We do. And so it's like when we get home, it's like we tag team all the chores in the household. I don't just go, oh, I'm going to go shut myself in my room, watch my show, play my game. My wife can take care of everything. No, my wife gets a little annoyed the way I do things. I prefer to wash the dishes first and then work my way down. She's like, why do you start with the dishes? I like to start with the top down. It's kind of what I do. And I do the floors last. She would rather do the floors first, I guess. I don't know. It's just a difference of things, opinions and that. But we do work together. The man's supposed to put his wife first in all things. Man as the head of the household does not mean, hey, I get to a restaurant, I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to eat, woman. Now, the real man, what does he do? He lets the wife pick whatever she wants. Obviously within reason of the budget, there's other factors. And then he orders what he wants. And then when she gets her food and she doesn't like her food and likes his better, that he happily switches and says, here, I want you to be happy. Especially if he doesn't mind what she ordered. That's the way it goes. It's the way it always goes. That's what it's talking about. Now, again, as you continue to look through that, look what it says. Husbands, love your wives, Christ of the church, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own body. He who loves his wife loves himself. No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord is the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bone. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, the two become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I'm speaking concerning Christ and the church. He's talking about how the church and Christ become one. He says, nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. I think that's probably the challenge here. That last verse 33, when it comes to the role of men and women, that men are to make sure they love women. Now, I don't mean the way the world wants to talk about make love. I'm talking about the way Christ loves. And women are to see that they respect men. I guarantee you that a man who feels respected is going to have no problem loving his wife. And a husband who loves his wife the wife's not gonna have a problem respecting her husband. And in that society, I don't think we've got to be a society that says, hey, men are gonna tell women how to act and women are gonna tell men how to act. And I think that's the problem here. Is that we're living in a society where women are trying to tell men how to act. Now, I'm not talking just about when a man does something that they shouldn't do. I'm talking about that women are saying, man, you got to be this way. Men, and this is what you see. It's like, not showing your emotions, being that's toxic masculinity. Being aggressive, being competitive, that's toxic masculinity. Not giving way and not letting women do everything they want to do, that's toxic masculinity. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about women are telling men what to do. They're not really respecting men. And you see this everywhere. Where men in movies nowadays, if a woman's a lead, male characters are now idiots, dumb, troublemakers, or they're the villain. If they seem sensitive, if they seem like they're actually kind of more male, they're the villain. There. You look at sitcoms of the day. Men are always the buffoon. You look at commercials. Men are like other children who can't figure anything out. That kind of thing. That's the problem. And so, trust me, men from watching all of this, they're being beat down. And so how are they supposed to do what they're called to do, which is to lead? Men were created to lead. but they can't do it without their helpmate. They can't do it without how God created them to do. Now, when we're like, wait a minute, does that mean I've got to be a homemaker? What if I want a job? What if I want to do all this? Notice again, I have not really talked about anything else. But I just want to read over Proverbs 31 for a bit. The virtuous woman. I just want to point a few things out here as I come to a close here. He's writing, who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of grain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax, and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night, and provides food for her household, and a portion for her maidservants. She considers a field and buys it, and from her profit she plants a vineyard. Notice there, it's talking about the woman working, making investments. It's not saying, oh, the woman's she works in the household barefoot and barefoot in the kitchen and that kind of thing, whatever the statement actually is. I don't even remember what it actually is, barefoot something. No, she's a hard worker. She does business. That's it is. She considers a field, she buys it. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arm. She perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hand holds the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. She reaches out her hand to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her house, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, when he sits among the elder of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies sashes for the merchants. You notice again, business. There's nothing wrong with a woman working. And notice her husband becomes of respect. Why? Because he doesn't have to worry. She's completing him, is what it is. Strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. That's an important thing too. She watches over the ways of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children raise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. Again, you see the husband? He's got an important job here. He speaks well of her husband. Don't refer to your husband. Your husband should never refer to their wives as the old ball and chain. Ever. I know it's often a joke, but it's not. You praise her. You don't complain about her. It says, many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. That's the husband praising her. Now notice about that. The husband also praised her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. It's not praising her just to everybody else. It's praising her to her. And then charm is deceitful and beauty is passing. But a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised. Give her of the fruits of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. So I haven't unpacked everything, but I just wanted to unpack a little bit there. The men and women. Men, you're called to lead. Be the leader, but don't lead the way the world does. What Jesus called disciples, when you lead, do not rule it over them like the hypocrites and the Gentiles do. We rule like Christ does, the servant leader. That the King of Kings and Lord of Lords got down on his knees, took a towel around his waist, and washed feet, the lowly of servant jobs. That is what the man's job is. To take care of what is around him, to look after things that are around him, and to put the other above himself. And woman, the role has to do with being the helpmate of the man. You're of equal value, and let that not be forgotten. And it's got nothing to do with societal standards, and there's the problem. Society wants to change. Society wants to move the bars. Build it on God's foundation. Because then you're not going to end up with confusion. You're not going to end up with this idea of gender confusion that is plaguing our young people today. You'll end up doing it God's way. All right, we're going to stop there for today. As always, I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to write to me, go right ahead. PastorStephenTeed@gmail.com. You can write to me there. Or you can leave a comment on YouTube. My privileges have been reinstated, even though they like to come after me every once in a while. Feel free to do that. Write me there as well. I'd love to hear from you. Even if you want more discussion and that kind of thing, please write into me. Until next time, May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you and give you His peace. And may you be built on the solid foundation of Jesus Christ.